It began in Alexandria, the ancient city of fire and light, the crossroads of the known world. In the shadow of the great library, among scrolls that mapped the heavens and measured the earth, there was one text whispered about in fear, a work so dangerous that even to speak its name was considered blasphemy. They called it the Dialogue of Shadows. No one knew who had written it. Some said it was a forgotten student of Plato. Others claimed it was a fragment of Hermetic revelation, written by a priest who had glimpsed the secret structure of reality itself. But what was certain is that, centuries ago, the guardians of knowledge had banned it, sealing its words under threat of death. Because the text did something no other dared to do, it questioned reality itself. According to later accounts, the Dialogue of Shadows began with a simple question: if the gods can deceive the eyes, how can one be certain the world exists at all? From that single sentence, the ground beneath philosophy trembled. The story of this forbidden text first resurfaced in 146 BCE, when Roman soldiers sacked Corinth. Among the ruins, a centurion found a bronze chest engraved with the symbol of the Ouroboros, a serpent eating its own tail. Inside were fragments written in fading Greek, unlike any other manuscript found at the site. When translated, they revealed strange conversations between two figures, the philosopher and the shadow. The philosopher asks, "What is the substance of the world?" And the shadow replies, "That which believes itself to be." The Roman scholars who examined it were disturbed. They saw in these lines a dangerous skepticism, a poison that could unravel faith, empire, and order. They ordered the fragments destroyed. But one copy survived, smuggled by a scholar named Demetrios of Tarsus, who risked execution to preserve what he believed was the most profound text ever written by mortal hands. Demetrios fled east, to the libraries of Pergamon, where he studied the scroll in secret. What he discovered would haunt him for the rest of his life. The text claimed that everything, the stars, the earth, the gods themselves, were projections of consciousness, shaped by perception. That the universe was not a place we inhabit, but a dream we share. If 10 men gaze upon the sun, the shadow wrote, there are 10 suns, and none are the same. To the Pythagoreans, this was madness. To the Stoics, it was heresy. But to Demetrios, it was revelation. He began to believe that the author of the text had pierced the veil of reality, glimpsed a hidden order where thought created matter, an idea centuries ahead of its time. And yet, as he continued his study, strange things began to happen. He wrote that the more he read, the more the world around him seemed to shift. Objects appeared where none had been. Days felt longer than they should. And at night, he heard a whisper, a voice that called his name and asked, "Do you believe this world is real?" Within months, Demetrios vanished. His notes stopped mid-sentence. The scroll disappeared again, buried under centuries of silence. But the legend of the Dialogue of Shadows never truly died. For in the centuries that followed, fragments of its words would reappear, in Gnostic manuscripts, in Neoplatonic commentaries, and even in forbidden Christian heresies that claimed the material world was a divine illusion. Who wrote the text? What did it truly reveal about the fabric of existence? And why did so many powers, from philosophers to priests, try to erase it? The answers would resurface again nearly 500 years later, in the dim candlelight of a monastery that should never have existed. Nearly 5 centuries after the mysterious disappearance of the Dialogue of Shadows, the text resurfaced, not in Greece, nor in Rome, but in a forgotten monastery perched above the desert sands of Alexandria's southern frontier. It was the 7th century CE, and the empire of learning had fallen silent. The great library was ashes, its scrolls devoured by fire and conquest. But within the ruins, monks of the Order of the Watchers guarded what little knowledge remained, manuscripts deemed too dangerous for ordinary eyes. Among their relics lay a chest, sealed in bronze, marked once again with the Ouroboros, the serpent consuming its tail. Inside was a single, brittle parchment, the lost Dialogue of Shadows. The man who found it was not a monk, but a wanderer, a philosopher named Cleon of Tyre, a disillusioned scholar who had once studied under the last heirs of Neoplatonism. He came to the monastery in search of peace. He found, instead, a mirror that shattered everything he believed. Cleon was a man tormented by contradiction. He had studied Aristotle's logic, Plato's forms, and Plotinus one, yet none could answer the question that haunted him. If thought can imagine anything, how can we be sure the world is not imagined? When he first unrolled the forbidden text, the words shimmered faintly in the lamplight, written in an ink that seemed to darken when read aloud. The dialogue began with an exchange between two unseen voices. Philosopher: why does the world persist if the soul withdraws? Shadow: because the dreamer has not yet awakened. Cleon froze. This was no ordinary philosophy, it was metaphysical treason. The text denied not only the senses, but the gods themselves. It claimed that divinity was a byproduct of human perception, that even Zeus and Apollo were echoes within a larger, unseen consciousness. The gods exist, the shadow wrote, only so long as we believe in them. When the mind ceases its worship, they dissolve back into silence. Cleon's pulse quickened. This was not philosophy, it was revelation. He began to study the text obsessively, cross-referencing it with fragments from Hermetic writings, Egyptian funerary hymns, and Orphic cosmology. Slowly, he began to understand what the author had intended. The text wasn't merely questioning reality, it was describing how reality is formed. It taught that perception is not passive, it creates. That every mind, through its thoughts, projects its own world. That existence is not a shared structure, but a harmonized illusion, constantly rewritten by collective belief. To prove this, the author described an experiment, a ritual of the mind. By focusing one's thought into pure awareness, one could cause the veil to shimmer, revealing that the solid world is nothing more than vibrating thought. Cleon tried it. At first, nothing. But then, as he stared at the flicker of the oil lamp, he noticed something strange. The flame bent toward him, though there was no wind. The shadows on the walls pulsed like breathing lungs. He stopped sleeping. He wrote in his diary, "I see the world changing when I look away. Perhaps it always has." Word spread among the monks. Some said Cleon was touched by divine vision. Others whispered he was possessed by the very shadow he read of. The abbot ordered the scroll sealed again, but Cleon refused. He declared, "If this is illusion, then illusion is the truest God." That night, lightning struck the monastery's bell tower. The next morning, Cleon was gone, leaving behind only a note written in trembling hand. Reality is not real. It is only what the mind remembers. The dialogue of shadows vanished once more. The monks, terrified, buried it beneath the desert stones, marking the site with a single word, Lambdatheta, Lethe, meaning forgetfulness. But the world, it seemed, was not ready to forget. Centuries later, long after the desert had swallowed that monastery whole, travelers in the early Byzantine era claimed to have found strange writings hidden in tombs, texts that spoke of the dreamer, the shadow, and the world that does not exist. And once again, whispers began to spread, that somewhere in those pages was the answer to the oldest question of all. What if the world we see is the lie we tell ourselves to stay sane? By the time the Byzantine Empire reached its golden age, the dialogue of shadows had already passed into rumor, a myth whispered among mystics, condemned by theologians, and hunted by the emperor's censors. But in the year 532 CE, a scholar named Irenaeus of Antioch claimed to have found a full copy. He was no heretic. Irenaeus served as an imperial librarian, a keeper of sacred and classical texts. Yet beneath his devotion to order burned a curiosity that no faith could quench. He had heard of a manuscript buried in the desert, one that promised to reveal not the nature of God, but the illusion of creation itself. When he finally obtained it, wrapped in sand-worn linen and sealed with the mark of the Ouroboros, he understood why it had been banned. The dialogue began with the same question as before. If the gods can deceive the eyes, how can one be certain the world exists at all? But this version contained something the fragments had never shown before, a third voice. The text no longer spoke only between philosopher and shadow. It introduced the dreamer. And the dreamer said, "You are both my thoughts." That single line turned centuries of philosophy on its head. The dialogue's hidden section, which Irenaeus called the third revelation, claimed that all of existence was a mental construct within a single cosmic consciousness. Every human, god, and star was a fragment of one dreamer, temporarily forgetting its unity in order to experience individuality. "The world is the sleep of the eternal," it declared. "When the dreamer wakes, we shall vanish like smoke." Irenaeus was horrified, yet captivated. This doctrine erased all divine hierarchy. It meant Zeus, Yahweh, and every god ever named were projections within the same dreaming mind, reflections, not rulers. In its final section, the dialogue warned that one day, a seer of pure sight would awaken within the dream, recognize the illusion, and dissolve the boundaries between mind and matter. When the seer awakens, it said, the dream will collapse into light. Irenaeus believed the prophecy referred to an era, not a person, an age when humankind would realize that reality itself is thought. But when he shared this idea with the imperial scholars of Constantinople, they accused him of spreading madness. They declared the text an affront to creation, a blasphemy against both Greek reason and Christian revelation. The emperor's own theologian, Procopius, ordered the manuscript confiscated. Irenaeus refused. He fled the capital under cover of night, carrying the scroll to Mount Sinai, where a secret network of mystics preserved what the empire forbade. There, hidden among the caves, the dialogue found new life. The monks who studied it began to interpret its teachings not as heresy, but as metaphysical liberation. They called themselves the children of the dreamer. They practiced silent contemplation, believing that through deep meditation they could awaken and see the world as light. Centuries later, fragments of their practices would resurface in Sufi mysticism, Gnostic hymns, and the writings of Ibn Arabi, all echoing the same haunting truth. There is no separation between the dreamer and the dreamed. But Irenaeus' disappearance did not go unnoticed. Agents of the empire hunted the mountain hermits. Many were executed for the crime of dissolving reality. The dialogue was once again condemned to fire. And yet, it survived. A fragment of the third revelation found its way to Damascus, then to Baghdad, where it was translated into Arabic during the Abbasid Caliphate. Muslim philosophers, especially those of the House of Wisdom, debated its meaning, believing it to be the work of a lost Greek sage who had glimpsed divine unity. They gave it a new name, Kitab al-Zil, the Book of the Shadow. There, under the light of Islam's golden age, the forbidden ideas of the dialogue of shadows quietly merged with mystical philosophy, influencing thinkers like Al-Kindi, Avicenna, and Al-Farabi. Each, in his own way, echoed its most dangerous premise, that the mind does not observe reality, it creates it. But every rebirth invites another fall. As centuries passed, the guardians of orthodoxy, both in East and West, recognized the text for what it was, a rebellion against perception itself. And so, a new decree was issued, from Rome, from Baghdad, and from Constantinople alike. Let no man speak of the dreamer, lest he awaken. But it was already too late. Because somewhere, hidden within those fragments, a message was waiting, a message that claimed reality itself could be undone. By the dawn of the 13th century, the Book of the Shadow had become the most dangerous manuscript in existence. To the Church, it was a threat greater than heresy, for heresy still believes in truth, while this text doubted the very existence of truth itself. Whispers of it had reached Paris, the beating heart of medieval scholarship. In the halls of the University of Paris, a small circle of secret scholars, calling themselves the Order of the Mirror, met by candlelight to study the forbidden words. They were men of reason, priests of logic, students of Aristotle himself. But in the dialogue, they found something even Aristotle never dared, a philosophy that declared reason to be part of the illusion. Their leader, a philosopher named Matteo of Toulouse, had once been a devout Aristotelian. He had written commentaries on the metaphysics, praising the order of nature. But after encountering the Book of the Shadow, his writings changed tone. He began to hint that the senses deceive, that matter and mind are one, that the world was perhaps a thought dreaming itself into being. In a secret letter to a fellow scholar, Matteo wrote, "If all thought were to cease, would the stars still burn?" That single question spread through academic circles like wildfire. Theologians branded him a blasphemer. To question whether the universe existed without thought was to question the creation of God. Within months, the Inquisition was summoned. The Order of the Mirror was destroyed. Its members were either executed or vanished. Matteo's final writings were burned in the courtyard of Notre Dame, and witnesses claimed that as the pages turned to ash, one phrase could still be read in the smoke: "The dreamer wakes within us." But the story did not end there. Rumors persisted that a single surviving copy of the Book of the Shadow had been smuggled out of France, hidden within a collection of Arabic manuscripts bound for Sicily, then under the rule of the scholar King Frederick II. Frederick was no ordinary monarch. He was a patron of philosophy, a polyglot emperor who gathered Muslim, Jewish, and Christian scholars at his court. He believed that all knowledge, sacred or profane, was part of one divine design. When the manuscript reached him, he read it in secret, night after night, within the candlelit halls of his palace in Palermo. And then, abruptly, he ordered it buried. His chroniclers wrote that he claimed the text was a mirror that blinds, that within its pages lay an insight so profound it could unravel the order of faith and empire alike. According to legend, Frederick sealed the scroll in an iron box, engraved it with his own sigil, a falcon devouring a serpent, and commanded it to be hidden in the catacombs beneath Castel del Monte. There it would sleep for centuries. But history, like dreams, has a way of resurfacing. Centuries later, during the Italian Renaissance, a young mystic named Giordano Bruno began to speak of an infinite universe, one where every star was a sun and every soul a reflection of divine mind. He wrote, "All is one. The dreamer and the dream are not two." The church condemned him. Bruno was burned alive in 1600, and witnesses claimed he smiled before the flames consumed him. Some said he had read the Dialogue of Shadows. Others whispered that he had merely remembered it. From then on, the manuscript's trail disappears into the fog of history. Every few generations, a rumor surfaces. A scholar in Alexandria claims to have seen its fragments. A monk in the Alps speaks of a book of illusion. A collector in Prague swears he owns a translation copied from Arabic centuries ago. But no one has ever proved its existence. Yet its ideas, the dreamer, the illusion, the unity of all things, reappear in every era like shadows of a vanished truth. From Descartes' doubt of the senses, to Berkeley's claim that to be is to be perceived, to the modern theories of simulation and consciousness, all echo the same forbidden question first asked in a desert over 2,000 years ago. If the gods can deceive the eyes, how can we be sure the world exists at all? And still, the question haunts us. Every discovery we make, every atom we split, every law we write to define reality, it all returns to that same invisible point. A mirror, reflecting nothing at all. Centuries passed, empires fell, and the dialogue of shadows became a myth, a ghost of philosophy, buried beneath the ruins of time. But some ghosts refused to fade. In the late 19th century, a German archaeologist named Dr. Heinrich Vollmer was leading an excavation in the ruins of Cyrene, in modern-day Libya, an ancient Greek colony long lost to desert winds. His goal was simple: uncover Hellenistic inscriptions. What he found instead, hidden within a collapsed crypt, changed everything. There, sealed in a clay jar wrapped with oil-soaked papyrus, was a fragment of an unknown Greek dialogue. The script was fragile, yet the words, though incomplete, could still be read. The dreamer forgets to awaken. and so the shadow believes itself real. Vollmer immediately recognized the phrase from Legends of the Dialogue of Shadows. The scroll was carbon dated to the 4th century BCE, the very era of Plato and Aristotle. Yet it bore ideas that felt modern, quantum, almost digital in their understanding of illusion. Vollmer's discovery should have revolutionized philosophy. But before he could publish it, the fragment was confiscated by Ottoman officials. The scholar was accused of smuggling relics and imprisoned for months. When he was finally released, the fragment had vanished, transferred to Constantinople for safekeeping, according to the authorities. It was never seen again. Vollmer's notes, however, survived. He had translated several lines before his arrest. Among them were these chilling words: "The mind is the stage, the world is the play, and the player is both." That translation circulated quietly among European intellectuals, particularly in circles fascinated by mysticism and metaphysics. Within decades, its ideas resurfaced under a new name: idealism. Philosophers like Schopenhauer and Hegel echoed its core message that the material world is the projection of a deeper, unseen consciousness. But the most mysterious resurgence came from a physicist. In 1927, Werner Heisenberg, one of the fathers of quantum mechanics, famously declared that atoms are not things, but tendencies. When asked later what inspired his view of the observer and the observed, he admitted to having read a Greek text of uncertain origin that described reality as a dream shared by consciousness. Could Heisenberg have seen a surviving copy of the Dialogue of Shadows? No one knows. Yet somehow, the same forbidden question that haunted the ancient world returned, now dressed in the language of science. If observation defines reality, is the universe aware of itself through us? By the late 20th century, whispers of the Book of the Shadow appeared again in fringe philosophical groups. A handful of scholars claimed to possess microfilm copies taken from Ottoman archives before World War I. One version, translated anonymously and leaked online in 1999, begins with this haunting line: "To awaken is to end the dream, and the dreamer fears this." Whether real or fabricated, the text struck a chord in a world now obsessed with simulation, perception, and consciousness. The same idea that once condemned philosophers to fire now fuels scientific inquiry. The notion that reality might be an illusion has moved from forbidden mysticism to mainstream physics, neuroscience, and artificial intelligence. And so, the Dialogue of Shadows continues to live, not on parchment, but in the collective imagination of those who dare to ask the question that began it all. Because somewhere, in the silence between thoughts, in the flicker of awareness that wonders why we exist at all, the dreamer still stirs. If all this is but a dream, the text whispers, what happens when we wake? And that is the question that terrifies the gods, the philosophers, and the scientists alike. References for description and accuracy: Diogenes Laertius, Lives and Opinions of Eminent Philosophers, on Lost Dialogues and Early Greek Metaphysics; Plato, Timaeus, and the Republic, regarding illusion, perception, and creation myths; Aristotle, Metaphysics, on Substance, Being, and Reality; Proclus, Commentaries on Plato, Byzantine Interpretations of Idealism; the Pseudo-Lexicon, Byzantine Encyclopedia mentioning lost Greek dialogues; Avicenna Al-Farabi, Translations and Interpretations of Greek Philosophical Texts in Arabic; Giordano Bruno, On the Infinite Universe and Worlds; Werner Heisenberg, Physics and Philosophy, 1958; Richard Tarnas, The Passion of the Western Mind, Contextual Reference for Idealism's Evolution; Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, Entries on Idealism, Simulation Hypothesis, and Gnosticism;